About 4 years ago, I started dating a girl called Angie. I'd met her at school and we pretty much hit it off. Now, I liked almost everything about Angie, like how she preferred listening to songs on vinyl, and her love for everything nature. But there was one thing that we didn't agree on, and that was her incessant love for the Chick-fil-A restaurant. I'd first noticed it when we started going out, as Angie would often eat at the restaurant 3 times a day. She also wanted us to have most of our dates there. Now, I didn't hate the restaurant Chick-fil-A or its food. I just wasn't fond of fast food restaurants in general, but I really liked Angie, so I managed to tolerate it. At least I did, till one disturbing incident. We were on our date night, and as per Angie's request, we went to the Chick-fil-A restaurant. After ordering the food, we sat down to eat. As I said earlier, while I did tolerate eating there for her, I was always jesting about how bad the food was. I remember telling her, "You know, they might say this is chicken, but I'm pretty sure it's sewer rat." Angie laughed before responding with, "Well, it's some pretty good sewer rat, and since you're talking about it so much, maybe I'll catch some from the sewers and grill them for you at home." We both laughed hard at her response as we continued eating. Having the same humor was another thing I liked about Angie. She knew I didn't like being there, and she was able to laugh about it with me. As we continued eating, I decided to make fun of the food one last time, as I said, "You know, if we wanted food this bad, we could have just eaten at the dumpster." Angie then responded with, "Hey, that's enough. I know you're here only because of me, but I'm pretty sure you'll soon love their food, just like I do. I just need to shove more of their amazing sandwiches down your throat." We laughed again, and I decided it was time for me to stop my jests. But out of the corner of my eye, I could see an employee giving me a death stare. Now, I don't remember talking to or meeting this employee, but for some unknown reason, he was looking at me with pure hatred in his eyes. I tried ignoring it at first, as I told myself he might not be looking at me, but this particular employee didn't stop staring at me throughout the rest of our date. Now, I'm not really a confrontational person, so I told Angie that we should get our food to go as I wanted to go catch a movie after eating. On our way to the theater, I couldn't help but feel like I was being followed. The feeling didn't go away even when I walked back home after dropping Angie off at her apartment. I looked over my shoulder a few times, and I even stopped at intervals to check my surroundings, but no matter how many times I checked, there wasn't anyone following me. I eventually told myself that it was all in my head and I was just being paranoid, but that night, something strange happened. It was around 2 a.m., and I couldn't sleep because I was still feeling a bit nervous. That's when I heard my doorbell ring. I didn't move, as I wondered who could it be at this time. I then decided to ignore it and hope the person will eventually go away, but whoever it was just kept ringing the doorbell till it became unbearable. Like I said earlier, I wasn't a confrontational person, but I knew I had to defend myself from whoever was harassing me, so I took my old baseball bat and I made my way to the door. But by the time I had gotten there, the person who had been ringing the doorbell was gone. I wondered who could be playing this stupid prank at a time like this. There weren't any children up at this time, and the adults I lived with in the neighborhood were pretty sensible people, so I knew it had to be some random individual that just wanted to mess with me. I stayed at the door for a while to see if the person would come back, but no one returned. The morning soon arrived before I could get any more sleep, so I left my house feeling tired. I usually like to walk in the mornings, but I didn't have the strength, so I went for my car. But as I reached for my keys, I noticed something odd. Someone had keyed my car. I was frustrated and confused as I asked myself who could have done something so petty. I knew I hadn't crossed anyone recently, so I was perplexed as I wondered why this person was doing this. I also had the feeling the person who did it must have been the same person who incessantly rang my doorbell at night. I then asked my neighbors if they'd seen anything, but they all said no. So, with nothing else to do, I just drove my car like that, and I made plans to report the defacement of my car later. Now, for some reason, even after my report, things just got worse from there. Whoever was harassing me just increased their efforts. Some things were just childish, as I came home one day to see my house had been TP'd. Others were very disturbing, as the person also inscribed the words, "Die" on my door. Apart from all this, I constantly felt like I was being watched. I thought I was losing my mind, so I looked it up and found out It's a biological phenomenon that's known as gaze detection or gaze perception. It's that strange feeling that someone is staring at you, but no matter how much I tried, I couldn't find the person that was following me around and making me feel like this. I suffered this torture for a week, and there still was no updates. That Saturday night, my girlfriend Angie told me she was going to come over to keep me company. She'd been really supportive during this period, so I decided to surprise her. I went to the Chick-fil-A restaurant to pick up her favorite order before she arrived. It was the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich and their chicken nuggets. But as soon as I stepped into the restaurant, I'd been feeling all weak. Whoever had been watching and harassing me was there, and it didn't take long before I spotted him. It was the same employee I had seen on my night out with Angie, and he was still staring at me with hate in his eyes. I'd pretty much had enough of everything that had been happening at that point, and I didn't care if I was confrontational. So immediately I walked up to him and asked, "Hey man, do you have a problem with me?" The employee, whose name was John, then looked at me and said, "You don't deserve to be with her, you disgrace of a human being." His response told me all I needed to know, as I was now sure he was the same person who had been stalking and harassing me all week. So I told him, "What did I ever do to you, John, you sick freak?" With rage in his eyes, John then responded with, "What did you do? You opened your foul mouth to insult the prestigious food of the esteemed Chick-fil-A restaurant. I heard what you said, and I decided to teach you a lesson for that." John's words left me speechless, as it didn't make any sense why he would do all that, just over a couple of harmless jests. The man also had a crazy look in his eyes, so I assumed he was unhinged. I then took out my phone and told him, "So you made my life a living hell just because I joked about your shitty food? Are you crazy? I'm calling the cops." But before I could dial the number, John attacked me. He threw a barrage of blows while he screamed the words, "I'll kill you," over and over again. I tried to defend myself from his attacks, but the man was like an animal. I eventually managed to get away, and I ran to my car. John followed me out of the restaurant, so I opened my phone's camera to film the entire incident and have some hard evidence to show the cops. Once I entered my car and closed the door, John, who was frustrated, fiercely punched my car's window. I immediately called the cops from the safety of my car, and John was arrested later that day. After some investigations into his background, it was revealed that John suffered from intermittent explosive disorder, IED. Apparently, this disorder involves frequent episodes of impulsive anger that are out of proportion to the event that triggered it. More investigations also revealed John was an avid lover of the Chick-fil-A restaurant and their food, which is one of the major reasons why he worked there. He'd also been named Employee of the Month due to his dedication, and he cited this as one of the reasons why he couldn't stand by and let me insult the restaurant's food. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges, but even though I was extremely angry, as I didn't want to see his face anymore, and I just wanted to get him the help he so desperately needed. After the incident, I started to hear about some strange loyalty prices going on behind the scenes with their employees, but I never thought some of the employees would take it that far. I completely stopped going to the Chick-fil-A restaurant after that day, and my girlfriend Angie completely understood why. It's been a couple of years since this incident happened, but I still can't pass a Chick-fil-A restaurant without seeing John's angered face. And because of that, I always have this subconscious fear of being attacked by one of Chick-fil-A's loyal but crazy Employee of the Month.
For the last 2 years, I've been going to a Chick-fil-A restaurant to work. Although most people have resumed working in offices and companies, I still have a work-from-anywhere job. So instead of just sitting in my house in front of a laptop, I like to visit this Chick-fil-A restaurant and do my work. Most of the staff there know me, and the manager even reserves a small table in the back for me. Now, you must know, I live in a rural town in Colorado, and there are not more than 300 homes here. Everyone knows everyone, and your business is everyone's business. If anyone new came into our town, the news would spread like wildfire. One evening around 6, I was sitting at my usual table in the back when I noticed a black van parked in the parking lot. At 6, the parking lot was full of cars and trucks, as many school kids and other town residents came to the Chick-fil-A to grab a bite. And the black van could be one of them. But as the hours passed and the restaurant started to become empty, the van was still standing in the parking lot. Now let me tell you, people in these towns mostly own pickup trucks as they are practical. Otherwise, they have standard cars. None of us own such a van. So when the van didn't move from the parking lot for another couple of minutes, I decided to inform the manager of its presence. "Hey, Mark, I just wanted to let you know that there's a black van parked in the parking lot. No one has gotten out of the van in hours, and it's been there for quite some time, too."
Oh, Sandra, it's probably van lifer. You know people who live in vans and travel the whole country? We let those people park their vans in the parking lot and spend the night here. Don't worry.
Well, knowing this did put me at ease. I went back to work at around 9, packed up my stuff, said goodbye to the staff, and left the Chick-fil-A. On my way back to my house, I looked through my rearview mirror and saw the same van following me. My first thought was maybe the person in the van needed some groceries or toiletries at the big supermarket, which was on my way home. But when we passed the supermarket and the van continued to follow me, I knew the driver or whoever was in the van was trying to follow me. That evening, instead of going home, I drove my car to my boyfriend's house. I was in no way going to give this person the exact address of my home. I went into my boyfriend's home even though he wasn't home, and told his dad what was going on. The moment his dad stepped out of the house to investigate the black van that was then parked in front of the house, the van drove off. That proved my suspicion that the van was following me. I spent the night with my boyfriend's family that night, as I felt unsafe returning to my place. When the van rushed past my boyfriend's home, I clicked a picture of its license plate, which was registered in Texas. The next day, instead of going to the Chick-fil-A, I decided I should just work from home. I felt much safer inside the four walls of my house. I had a very productive workday, and at night after dinner, I decided to watch The Notebook just to kill time before bed. That's when I heard a knock on my door.
Miss Sandra Olson, please open the door. This is the Colorado Police Department.
The voice from outside said. I paused the movie and opened my door. 2 cops were standing in front of my house.
Miss Olson, we need to talk to you about a case. Can we come in?
Sure, officers. What is it about?
Is it right that most days of the week you work at the Chick-fil-A by the highway?
Yeah. Instead of sitting on my couch with my laptop, I like to sit in the Chick-fil-A and work from there. Why? What happened, officers?
Do you know Kea, a waitress that works there?
Yes, officer. I know her pretty well. She lives a few blocks down the road, and she's the one that brings my order most of the time.
We also got to know that yesterday you told the restaurant's manager that you spotted a black van in his parking lot.
The mention of the black van got me a little tense. The officers noticed my discomfort right away.
Ma'am, is there anything you'd like to share about the van with us?
Yes, officer. And I told them how the van had followed me back to my boyfriend's house, and how they drove off when my boyfriend's dad stepped out of the house. Also, as the van drove by, I took a picture of the license plate. It's from Texas. I showed them the picture from my cell phone.
So, Miss Olson, do you know what happened in front of the Chick-fil-A this evening, in the parking lot?
What do you mean? What happened, officers?
A black van showed up in the parking lot in the evening, and Kea was abducted. Now, we're assuming that it was the same van.
Oh my God! What do you mean? Is Kaya okay? Did you guys find the van? I was panicked. This was bad. The van that was following me around had abducted a woman from the same spot I visit daily.
Calm down, Miss Olson. We are still investigating, and the manager told us that you might be of help. But after hearing about the incident, that happened with you yesterday. We have a feeling that the abductors were targeting you. Kaya was just a casualty. Wrong place at the wrong time, we guess.
I don't know what to say, officer.
You might have to come with us down to the station, ma'am. We need your help in catching the culprit.
A week passed by, and there was no news of Kaya. All they had was the van's license plate number and the CCTV footage, in which we could see Kaya get abducted. That's when the sheriff came up with a plan. This was a dangerous plan, but if it worked, we could catch the culprit and probably save Kaya's life. So, on the following Monday, I went to the Chick-fil-A at my regular table, opened my laptop, ordered the usual burger and drink, and started working. Only this time, all the staff was replaced by my undercover cops, and I had an earpiece in my ears to hear the sheriff's commands. The day went by, and as the evening rolled in, so did the black van. It was parked in the exact spot it was parked before. As the clock struck 9, I packed up my stuff, said my goodbyes to the staff, and left. I knew what I was walking into, but I had to do it. As I passed the black van to go near my car, the door to the van suddenly opened, and out stepped a big bald guy with a lot of hair all over his body, except his head. He was smiling at me creepily. I was shaken to my core just looking at the giant man. He was easily 6'4". Most of the teeth in his mouth was rotten or missing, and he wore a very dirty vest and jeans a little too tight for him. He launched at me trying to grab me and shoved me into his van. I fell flat on my ass. Not knowing what to do, I just looked at him with shock and fear on my face. I knew he would bend down to pick me up and kidnap me. Just then, the cops surrounded us.
Hands up, old man! Hands where we can see them, and turn around!
Officer McAllister said, the same one who showed up my house that night a few days ago. The man froze in his tracks. Meanwhile, a female cop helped me to get up and took me to my car. I was luckily saved due to the sheriff's sting operation, but we are all worried about Kaya. After 3 days of intense torture, the man that goes by the name Samuel Byer told the cops that he had abducted Kaya instead of me and locked her up in an underground cellar on his property, which was just south of the Chick-fil-A. Fortunately, Kaya was found safe, and she was doing okay. That was the closest I had ever been to a real-life psychopath. After that incident, I never went back to that Chick-fil-A ever again.
Many ghost stories have been written about Chick-fil-A, but we cannot say for sure which is true and which is not. Here is my experience. My friend and I went for a walk to a hill station a little away from the city. We both went on my bike. There was a dilapidated complex which had some branded clothing shops and a restaurant named Chick-fil-A. But all were in bad condition. It seemed like no one had been to that complex for years. We went to a hotel and booked the room. We came to know from the hotel sweeper that the complex was haunted. One story goes that people have encountered ghosts, and some say they have seen a woman running from one side to the other end at Chick-fil-A and jumping off a toilet in that restaurant. My friend Steve and I decided to go to Chick-fil-A and find out the truth about ghost stories doing rounds there. We planned to visit the restaurant after midnight because that was the best time to encounter a ghost. We were normal people and we were scared as hell. We were not ghost hunters, neither had we known any trick to control any spirit. The whole plan of visiting the haunted complex was to see how courageous we were, and no doubt we wanted to see a real ghost. We left our hotel room at around 11:30 p.m. and headed towards the haunted complex. The complex was about 2 miles away from our hotel room. The place was deadly quiet. Steve already started shivering by just looking at the Chick-fil-A. This Chick-fil-A was indeed scary. I asked my friend if we could go back to the room, as I was not willing to move a muscle toward that haunted Chick-fil-A. Steve was holding himself together somehow and wanted to go inside to get the experience of being with ghosts. I decided to stay outside as he walked towards the Chick-fil-A, and in no time he entered and disappeared.
"Call me if you need any help!"
I shouted. I was terrified to the bone while waiting for Steve to come out. Many thoughts crossed my mind during the waiting phase. I was thinking that he would come out screaming at any moment. 15 minutes had gone by, and there was no sign of him. I was worried sick about him and decided to go in to check on him, as it only takes 5 minutes to go and come back from the Chick-fil-A. I started cursing myself. I shouldn't have made this plan in the first place, and this was so stupid. Anyways, Steve was now my responsibility, and I had to take him back home in one piece. I started chanting all the mantras I could recall while entering Chick-fil-A. It was the scariest place I'd ever seen in my life. When I entered the Chick-fil-A, I heard footsteps approaching me. It seemed as though somebody was running towards me. My heart stopped beating for a few seconds. In no time, that thing bumped into me. A terrible woman dressed in torn white clothes ran at me and jumped on me and threw me to the ground. She sat on my chest and screamed loudly. I was also shouting, and then that ghost jumped off of me and went towards the toilets. Then I heard Steve's voice. He was running towards me, and he fell unconscious on the floor. I used the torch to illuminate his face. It was pale, and he was breathing profusely. I couldn't understand what needed to be done. Without a thought, I started dragging him out of the Chick-fil-A. I picked up my phone and dialed 911, but before somebody could answer, Steve whispered, "Don't call anybody, and get the hell out of here." Steve was gaining strength, and he started walking and asked me to follow along. Following him, I asked, "Are you okay? What happened here?" No response. He started running. He was scared, very scared. After a few minutes passed, I chased him, closely following, and after a few minutes we were on the road far away from that haunted Chick-fil-A. Steve stopped, collected his thoughts, and said, I saw the lady. She was in white attire, and I could see her clearly despite zero visibility in the Chick-fil-A. Her feet were positioned backwards. She has long hair, and the blood was trickling from the tip of her hair. I haven't seen anything like this, even in my wildest dreams." I could see his face was covered with sweat and still very pale. Shortly thereafter, we reached our room. I looked at my watch. It was 1:30 in the morning. I asked Steve to tell me about the incident from the beginning. He said, "You should have come." He mumbled with fear in his voice. Looking at his condition, I decided not to bother him any further. "Get some sleep. We'll talk in the morning, okay?" I said while preparing to sleep. His eyes were wide open, and sleep was miles away from him. I left the lights on and went to sleep. There was a knock at the door. It was room service. I looked at the wall clock. It was 10 already. I turned to check on Steve. Damn it! He was still sitting in the same position as I left him earlier. He was looking down and was mumbling. You should have come. You should have come." He was repeating this line without pause. I shook him vigorously, and he came to his senses a little, but he was still very scared. Within no time his pupils dilated, and he again started repeating the same sentence. I was also very scared. I did not understand what to do or how to fix it. I picked up my phone and started to search for a nearby hospital. I decided to help Steve up and take him outside. We got on my bike and took off. I was taking him towards the hospital at full speed, but there was a lot of traffic on that road. Suddenly, Steve screamed loudly and jumped in front of an oncoming truck. I stopped the bike. A crowd had gathered. Steve's body was ripped apart into 5 pieces. The sight was horrifying. I don't know if it was suicide or if that ghost killed Steve.